think sometimes we get, as educators, get tied up in the little bubble of the institution that we're in, and sometimes you have students who are hearing kind of you over and over again. You're not quite sure if they're getting it or if what you're saying is resonating with them. So to be able to take practices from your own institution or just as you as an educator and to share it with others and to share it beyond the four walls that you teach almost feels a little bit like a responsibility as an artist and as a theater arts educator. Hi, my name is Jesmille Darbouze, and I am a Carnegie Mellon School of Drama alum.
Hi, I'm Rick Edinger. I'm the Area Chair of Acting and Music Theater at Carnegie Mellon University School of Drama and Associate Professor of Musical Theater. Yay! Hi, folks. How are you?
Hi.
Good. We're gonna take the next hour to sit and get to know one of our favorite alums of our school, Jesmille Darbouze, who has been seen in television, film, Broadway. Broadway credits include A Doll's House,
Yes,
Betrayal, Kiss Me Kate. You most recently were in
Classical Theater of Harlem, production
Yes.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yes, amazing.
Worked numerous times at the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey, which is another regional theater that focuses on Shakespeare.
You've collaborated with people like Jamie Lloyd.
Yes.
Anyone familiar with the Sunset Boulevard that's on Broadway right now, starring Nicole Scherzinger? We could talk about that. But yeah, that production.
That director
is the same director as A Doll's House.
And Betrayal.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Kathleen Marshall.
Kathleen Marshall.
Yeah.
Yes. Scott Ellis.
Casual, just like these iconic artists that you are sharing space with and collaborating with. So before we get to that stuff, I would love if you could just share a little bit about like your upbringing, like where are you from, what influenced you as a young person pre-college, like before we ever got there.
Yeah, so I was born in New York. I grew up in Long Island. My mother is immigrated from the Dominican Republic. My dad immigrated from Haiti. They met each other in New York. They had my brother and I. Grew up in Long Island. And before I even knew about the arts, I loved music and I loved performance. And my mother, one of my fondest memories is my mother had these leotards that she stopped wearing. It was the 80s. And I would put them on and just dance around the house. And dance around the house in these leotards before I even knew what a dance class was. But I was, when I was going through elementary school, I always sang in the chorus, I played an instrument, and then I watched the movie Grease. And that was it. I was like, I want to do what they're doing, right? And then I watched West Side Story, and it was over. It was over. So after kind of eventually discovering musical theater, my love for musical theater, we moved to South Florida. I went to a magnet school that had a drama program. I then auditioned for a performing arts high school. During that time, it was quite a challenging time. My parents separated, so I was growing up, with my two other brothers, single parent household, lower middle class. I had to work during the summers. All the things to sort of help and support the family. And then my commute to high school was about an hour and a half. So I went to high school in downtown Miami, and I lived in this town called Homestead. So I would take a school bus at 5:45 in the morning to go to the train station in this area called Kendall, Dayland, and then take another 20-minute train to downtown Miami. And I did that for 4 years. And then I auditioned for Carnegie Mellon. And I got into Carnegie Mellon, but I didn't get into all the schools I auditioned for, which was interesting. Yeah,
let's talk about that a little bit.
The ones I didn't get into.
We don't have to like drag anyone.
Yeah.
And you're doing just fine.
Doing just fine. So I was torn between Carnegie Mellon and Southern Methodist, and it was down to who was going to support my education financially.
Yeah.
Because again, given my upbringing and not coming from any sort of generational wealth or additional resources, it was really hard to commit to a program that was out of our scope financially. And my mom fought really hard to get the support we needed, and Carnegie Mellon came through, so I was able to attend.
Yeah. You mentioned some no's from other schools, and how many of you are applying to schools in theater or the arts, or have already applied to schools in the theater and the arts? It's a nerve-wracking process, right? How did those no's affect you from those schools?
The no's, I was disappointed, of course. You're going to be disappointed. But I knew that I had something to share, and I knew I had a gift, and I knew that this was what I was meant to be doing. And every no, I was like, well, we just got to try again, right? We've got to, like, one no isn't a permanent no.
Yeah. I want to flip the question. How did the yeses affect your life?
Yeah. The yeses are validating, right? But most importantly, how do you get to a place where you don't need the yeses to validate you?
Yeah.
And you don't need the yeses for you to know your self-worth and what you have. And that's a journey that even as a professional, I'm still trying to dig deep in and put into practice. You know, sometimes we can know these things in our heads, and oh, that no doesn't mean anything, and I'm still talented, and I have something to say, and I have something to share, right? But how do you really know it deep in your bones?
Something that I always tell young students as they are applying to our school or any other school, and I was talking about this over lunch today with some students at our table as well, is that those no's don't matter to you, right? The no's aren't going to change your life in any way. The yeses are open doors that you get to walk through and then walk into the next yes or no, whatever situation that may be. But the no's never really affect you, right? So like, linger in that positive. Go to the place that is opening their doors to you and knows how to help and cultivate what it is that you have to grow.
Absolutely.
Right? Same thing happens in our professional life, right?
Yes.
And we know when we're in those rooms of like, this is a yes for me, right? Like, yeah, I love this, being in this space and sharing space with these people.
Yeah.
And can't wait to see what we can do when we actually get into a process.
Absolutely. The bravery that I had to really dig deep and find and discover, I also sort of take with me into the professional world, because this is a very vulnerable work that we do, and you need to be a brave soul to tackle it well. So that comes to mind, right? The bravery and the courage to dig deep and say, I have something to say, and has stayed with me. So our classes demanded a lot of us, and there were very challenging moments. It's uncomfortable growing isn't always comfortable. I don't know if you remember when you were growing up as a kid and you get those, they call it growing pains, right? And your muscles and your knees hurt, especially if you're growing to be really tall. I think that's the same when you're learning new skills or getting better at the skills that you have. There are sometimes moments where it's not fun and you can get discouraged, but partly because you're growing, and it's okay if there's some discomfort in that growth. And so sitting with that, you know, I did not realize that then.
Right.
I was just crying to my mom on the phone, I want to go home, right? But looking back, it was all a part of my growth, not only as a performer, but as a person and as a young adult. So I was a musical theater major. And what I love about the training at Carnegie Mellon is that, yes, we were singing and dancing, but I definitely didn't feel that one side of the program was stronger than the other. If anything, I think they were just as rigorous and they were just as challenging and really well balanced.
Yeah.
There's more to just the part of performing on stage. It's what else is happening behind the scenes. Who is making you look so good in that costume, right? Who is working, lighting you and working endless hours to create the set that's right behind you and the chair that you get to sit in. Yeah. And so in our training, we have to do a semester of building a set or working on costumes. Yeah. And that's a lot of hours after classes. And I remember meeting with my classmates to work on our scenes after crew.
Yeah.
at like 11 o'clock at night, they still do, getting a studio space to continue to work.
You look at any successful artist in our field, no two people have marched down the same path. We all come from different places. We all have varying experiences with training, and that could look like different things. Sometimes it looks like a college education. Sometimes it looks like classes and experience in the work world. Trust that that's enough, and whatever path you walk down is the right path.
What lessons or tools do you find yourself still pulling on in your own work? I mean, you're still working constantly, so.
Honestly, my technique. I take what I learned from voice and speech with me before I warm up for a show. All of those tongue twisters and articulators and ways to put ease in my body so I'm prepared to do the work. I take that with me. I take a lot of my acting training and just the technique behind what it is, like what is the story that we're trying to tell? Who are these people? What is happening? And I also think I take with my, I didn't realize that the discipline that I had to have as a college student, that doesn't go away when you graduate. It just looks different. So all those hours put into crew and then to rehearse after graduating just looks different. What it looks like is I worked a shift until 11:30 at the restaurant, and now I'm gonna go home and prepare my material for an audition tomorrow. So that, I think the discipline needed in college, and to be able to harness into that discipline and sharpen that skill of holding myself accountable for the work that I'm responsible for and the work that I want to do, I transferred that into my career. It just doesn't look the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Helps to set up routines, processes for yourself. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit like the other end of the rainbow. At the end of your CMU education, you know, you've mentioned that you didn't have representation for several years, and you were sort of on your own, trying to march your own path. What did that look like? What were some of the challenges? What were some of the things that helped you step forward?
So I'll work backwards. Some of the things that helped me step forward after graduating was continuing to train. You don't graduate from a program and say, I got it. I now figured it out, right? As you evolve as a human and as you grow, your work also evolves and your work grows. And so I held on to the training piece. I kept taking dance classes. I kept taking voice lessons. I tried to get into an acting class, and I did get into acting classes just to stay sharp, just to stay ready. When I graduated from Carnegie Mellon, we do a showcase at the end of the senior year where it gives students the opportunity to meet with agents and managers, and hopefully that will lead to representation. And in our industry, the agents work as a liaison between the actor and the casting director, right? And sometimes if you don't have that, it makes it a little difficult to be seen for projects and to be seen for work. So because I didn't have that in my first 6 to 7 years, I relied heavily on open calls, which were open auditions that are done through our actors union, where you'd have to get up early in the morning, you'd have to get a number, you'd have to wait in line, you'd have to wait until you're called, hopefully you'd get seen, and you would audition. And I was very fortunate enough to book a lot of my early work through open calls. Again, that is, I'm gonna go back to the discipline piece, right? Of getting up early in the morning, you know, getting in line, preparing, being ready. It all kind of comes back to sort of all the skills I built in my training at Carnegie Mellon.
So let's talk about what I mean. So you teach currently, as well as pursuing your performance career still. What draws you to the projects that you take on? Like, what are some of the things that drive you artistically, creatively? Because that's an important part of the conversation, right? In addition to like, yes, this is a job, right? And like, I need to pay bills and do that whole financial aspect of the career, right? Like, what is it that sort of drives you creatively? What are you drawn to?
I'm drawn to stories. Like, I always start with, what's the kind of stories I want to tell? What are the stories that are happening that resonate with me, that I feel that I can fully bring myself to? I'm also interested in projects that are fun. Let's not forget the fun piece, the joy component to what we do. That's right.
It's interesting because we all come into this, often we come into this, right? How many of you have been in a production of something, right? Play, musical, right? Did you do it because you were being paid, or did you do it because you enjoyed doing it? Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting when those two things intersect. The thing that like really fuels us as a human being also becomes a source of income at the same time, and sort of like what the parameters around both of those things are, and when they really fit together, and when they are either one thing or the other.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about Midsummer for a moment.
Okay.
Right? Like talk about that, right? I mean, it's also happening like just a few blocks away from where you live and where you're raising your family.
Absolutely.
And for that community specifically in Classical Theater of Harlem.
Yeah, that was a very special experience working with the Classical Theater of Harlem. I actually lived 10 minutes away from the amphitheater where it was being done at Marcus Garvey Park, and there were a couple of things that were really special about that. One, it was a wonderful opportunity to bring Shakespeare to a community that's not used to seeing Black and brown artists speaking this text, right? Speaking and doing Shakespeare. It was also special. It was the first time I had worked with a director of color in my 20 years in the industry. Yeah, that's sit with that, right? And I had to sit with that. It was so special in that way, and to communicate and to be in a space where everyone looked like me, right?
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a shift for myself, because for so many years I've had to operate in spaces where I was an anomaly, right? And now to not be that, there's so much freedom, right? And feeling like you're in a space where you can just be you. So that was really special. And then my daughter got to see the show. I have a 7-year-old, and she came twice. And that was like to get to the point where she was old enough to see me on stage. And I remember her saying, "Mommy, I want you to do 1,000 plays." And I was like, me too. I also want to do 1,000 plays.
Yes.
Yeah.
To 1,000 plays.
To 1,000 plays.
Start counting.
Yes. But just making theater accessible to so many different kinds of people from different, and theater in New York can be quite expensive. And this was a production that was free to the entire community, to anyone and everyone who wanted to watch Shakespeare and watch A Midsummer Night's Dream on a nice summer night.
There's something so special to me about the visual representation of seeing ourselves reflected on stage. I, as a queer AAPI human, right, think about this. My first Broadway show where I ever saw an actor on stage who looked like me, who wasn't playing a stereotypical Asian trope, was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. People often ask me what show impacted me, or what experience impacted me, right? And it sounds silly. It's You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Yes, that You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Sounds goofy, but it was this like rainbow of human beings on stage, and I saw a Chinese American playing Linus, the kid with the blanket. And it wasn't about him being Asian, it was about him being a kid with a blanket. That like opened my eyes to like, oh, I can do that just like everyone else can, right? And I'm very thankful to see that your generation is starting to see a hard shift in that, so that we can see more people who look like us from our generation pursuing this as a career, and knowing that there's a place for them here, right? A place for you here, right? So let's talk a little bit about your collaborators and fellow artists that you've shared space with. We've talked to Jessica Chastain and Jamie Lloyd and Kathleen Marshall and Ariane Moayed and
Kelly O'Hara
Kelly O'Hara,
who I love
from,
so much.
Kiss Me Kate. Some like iconic theater folks, and you're sitting there sharing space with them. And I know as an actor, you're an incredible observer. Are there any characteristics that you find sort of common amongst these types of artists that are so iconic and so honored for what they do, that you feel like you've sort of pulled or watched?
Yeah, I couple of things. One thing that comes to mind is that they too don't think they figured it out, right? They too know that they don't see themselves as masters.
Yeah.
They see themselves as artists who have room to continue learning and to continue growing. They stay curious. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was doing Kiss Me Kate, Kelly O'Hara would record herself singing and then play it back to herself in the dressing room and listen to kind of just see what she was doing and almost to give herself notes in a way, which is quite common in the opera world. But she was still analyzing her work and listening to it and say, how can I make this better? And this is a woman who's been nominated for I don't even know how many Tony Awards, right? But still staying curious and still staying open to growth and open to learning. And again, nobody thinks they figured it out.
Yeah.
That's where that's what stands out to me.
Lifelong learners.
Mm-hmm. Lifelong learners.
Yeah, and those icons are also human.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just
They're
like all
human.
of us. Yeah.
I have an amazing story that Arian shared with me. Is everyone familiar with the late comedian Robin Williams? Yes. So Arian did a play called Baghdad. Gosh, that's terrible. No. Bengal Tiger, right? Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. And he did this play with Robin Williams. And during intermission, Robin went to his dressing room and said, how do you think our scene went? And Arian's like, I think it was fine. He's like, yeah, but did this part really work? And did you think that was kind of funny? And Arian's like, yeah, it was great. What are you worried about? And he's like, okay, and Robin's like, I just wanted to talk to you about it and see how it went. And you could see that Robin was still stewing with it. And then Robin left. And Arian realized, he was like, oh my goodness, Robin came in to get my approval, to check in because he was worried that he hadn't done enough and that it wasn't good enough. And I think at this point, Robin is just legendary.
True
Robin
legendary icon
Williams, right?
Entertainment. Yeah.
Exactly. So I just love sharing that story because it just goes to show they're also human, and they also come a little insecure, but also like back to they too don't feel like they figured it out.
Yeah. I remember doing a concert for Stephen Sondheim's 75th birthday, and I was standing in the wings. I was 22 years old. I was standing in the wings, and Audra McDonald was singing "There Won't Be Trumpets," one of his like iconic songs from Anyone Can Whistle. And before she went on, I watched her in the wings of the New Amsterdam Theater, pacing frantically, upstage, downstage, while the orchestra's playing the previous song. She's about to go on, and then she walked on, completely nailed it. And she walked off, and I shook her hand, and I just said, as a young actor, it was so nice to just see you. I mean, she was, I think, she only had 4 Tony Awards, I think, then. She's got 6 now. But yeah, it was just like such an eye-opening moment of like, oh, and all she said was, honey, as you start to collect these awards, the expectation just gets higher.
Yeah.
And it was such a human moment from her that I was like, wow. She's still feeling that same pressure that we all feel as young artists to like deliver, and to just see that she was human in that moment was so relieving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Jesmille Darbouze has had a really beautiful and amazing, robust career, collaborating with so many incredible artists of her time, of which she is one. To see someone like Jesmille, who came from humble beginnings, which she shared with our students, and then have such an incredible career, collaborate with leading professionals in our field, and be truly one of those top key players is really important to see that this is possible. If you stick with this, if you stick with your training, you commit to a life of learning, you too can be an incredible, influential artist.
Hello, well, thank you for being here with us and discussing this with us. A lot of really interesting topics that you both hit on the conversation, especially with the one of kind of these self-eternal conflicts that we have with ourselves as performers, and having this idea of what perfection is, or what we think is expected of us, or what this idea of high expectations for ourselves. What advice would you have for people who are dealing with that, in the aspect of what are maybe some tactics that you use to help get yourself out of that mind space of being too self-critical of yourself and of your work?
Yeah. What advice I would give for myself, or for anyone who's being overly judgmental of where they are in the process? Does that make sense? Or just like their work, or being really hard on themselves?
Their work, and like how hard they are on themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think as artists, I know for me, I'm also, for a long time was very much wanting to be a perfectionist, right? And do everything right, or put some very high expectations on myself. I would say, I think what's grounded me is that to just remind yourself that there's something to be learned wherever you're at, whatever stage you're in. And to take the moment to sit with that and ask yourself, what am I meant to be learning right now? What is it that I can take from this experience that will help me grow? That pressure and that expectation that we put on ourselves can get in the way of growth, right? And get in the way of the possibilities and what's possible for us. So I would just be easy and gentle on this human, on this instrument that you have. The industry can be challenging enough. So I think the more self-love that you have for yourself and where you're at, the easier it will be to face the already external challenges that come with just being an artist. I hope I answered that question. Did I answer that question? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you share a project or show that you worked on that truly challenged you, whether that be artistically, skillfully, or just the people who were in the production with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say A Doll's House was probably one of the most challenging theatrical experiences I had. Not only was I playing a leading role alongside a very well-known, seasoned actress, so there was a lot of pressure. But it was a production that really relied heavily on the actors. There were no props, there was no set. It was just 6 chairs. We were on stage the entire time. While doing that show, I also had 2 small children to tend to and take care of. And then I was also teaching at the same time. So during that production, I was teaching our seniors in their Business of Acting course, which is their showcase course that gets them ready for their showcase and understanding the industry before they graduate. And I would meet with students, I would teach from the dressing room, I would teach from the dressing room on Fridays, and then do coachings. And then on matinees, on Wednesdays and Saturdays, I would meet with students. On top of being in a show that you're on stage and you can't leave, that was quite intense. On top of being a parent. And then all the other responsibilities that come when you're in a high-profile show. You have to meet people after the show. You have to talk to people. You have to network if everyone's going out, because some big actors like, I want to talk to you more about your show. You have to say yes. You have to say yes. So that was an incredibly intense time and challenging time. And I think there's a bit of an unspoken pressure on Broadway. No one talks about it, but there's a pressure to be consistent. And when you have people coming to the theater and paying as much as they are for their ticket, you gotta deliver 8 times a week. Yeah. So that was a very challenging time. Yeah, absolutely.
Steven.
Hi.
Hi.
So when the lights are off, when the show's over, when the makeup's gone, the audience is home, when you're off stage in your home, how do you take care of you outside of acting, being the actor? How do you take care of you?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out, especially as a parent. You tend to put your oxygen mask on last, even though the airlines tell you to do it first. I'm figuring that out. But this is what I'll do a couple of things I have done in the past. So after an intense show, I go home, I always have a really good meal because I can't eat before the show. It's just not, it's very hard to eat before the show for me. And I love comfort food. I have a sweet tooth, ice cream, in pajamas, in bed. Oh, that's my happy place. That's a happy place. I think another way I take care of me, which I'm trying to remind myself, is really in the small things, right? Whether that's exercise, whether that's meditation, whether that's worship, if you worship in any way, whether it's just spending time with my friends, spending time with my children, having a nice meal with someone, surrounding yourself with people who build you up and support you and are your champions. Like those little things along the way were also very helpful when needing to kind of give back to myself. But ice cream and pajamas is always the go-to.
I think it's important that we are reaching a broader community of young art makers.
When you bring your full self is when the work is authentic. So if I could give any advice to any artists coming up, it's to bring your full self, flaws and all, to the work.
A lot of our training is so much about finding yourself and owning that and sharing that out with people, which is what makes the world a better place.
That you as a human being is interesting enough and captivating enough, and your point of view of the world is what we want to see.
If you could say something to your younger self or go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you say?
Yeah, I love this question. It always makes me emotional when I get asked this question, but I would say to myself, you are enough. You are interesting enough. You have everything you need already in you. I would tell myself to trust who you are and that is enough. And that the more you lean into yourself, very similar to some of the things that we're talking about, the more authentic and truthful your work will be. When you trust yourself and trust that your point of view is enough. And I say that to all of you. All of you are enough.
Thank you, Jesmille Darbouze.
Yeah.